Welcome Team Alt-E number 2. As a reminder, this is going to be a 5-minute presentation, 5-minute Q&A, and then 2-minute switch over between teams. So the timer will start as soon as you begin to speak. Best of luck.
Share the slides. Go to the first. All right, so for the first part of the task, we found that the solar project reduces Scope 2 emissions by about 47%, counting only the energy directly provided by the solar plant and locally stored. This excludes excess energy sold to the grid, since Chevron doesn't actually know what is done with that energy, and most likely the energy they buy back from PG&E to cover the rest of their needs comes from a mix of sources with higher emissions than solar. If we instead consider all of the solar energy produced, Scope 2 emissions could be reduced by 75%, and fully using available storage is also important because it allows more energy to be provided directly by the solar plant before any excess energy is sold to the grid. Next slide, please. We also found that Scope 2 emissions are actually a very small percentage of the total emissions of the oil field if we assume that the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions are proportionally the same as for the entirety of Chevron in 2019. So if we consider all the possible emissions, the solar project reduces them by about 0.1%. And if we consider just Scope 1 and 2, that reduction is about 2.6% in the best case scenario.
The main source of Scope 1 emissions is the use of natural gas to generate steam for enhanced oil recovery, releasing an average of 620,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide per year. One way to tackle this is through solar trough technology, which in order to generate the steam required. And one such installation has been completed in Oman and is saving 450,000 tonnes of CO2 at a reasonable cost.
We also looked at another potential solution for steam generation, which was geothermal energy. And you can see on the right that the cost ranges from $2,000 per kilowatt to $4,000 per kilowatt, so which has a kind of similar cost benefit to solar thermal, but it has the benefits that it takes much less space, and due to its higher capacity factor, you get a quick return on your investment. But however, there's some uncertainties, especially with locating reliable geothermal potential. You can see in the graph that the blue dot represents where approximately the oil field is located at, and which is not really the most resourceful area. Also, geothermal has the problem that the temperature underneath the earth can change over some time. It's not like wind and solar. We thought that the in-house expertise and equipment, for example, the drilling and stuff like that, could be helpful in this case, where they would get an edge and they could reduce costs.
Okay, so we propose 2 steps for reducing the emissions. The first step is a short-term solution, which takes the remainder of the Scope 2 emissions by installing the 10 megawatt wind farm, which would anyways from 1 megawatt to 2 megawatt turbines, having 5 or 6 turbines in a wind farm, which will generate the electricity at night as well. And they can meet the night demand without needing the extra battery storage, which will typically cost from 15 to 20 million, which is very similar to solar PV. And the time scale for the development of this complete project is close to 1 year. The next step for the longer term is to tackle much larger Scope 1 emission from the steam injection operation. The options we have identified are the solar thermal and the geothermal. The solar thermal being rated as the rated capacity at 800 megawatt, and the geothermal plant being rated at the standard capacity of 200 megawatt. Both will produce 1.6 terawatt hour of steam per year. So which would typically save around 363,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year. The estimated cost for both of these projects would be around 500 million. But when we really consider the time scale, the timescale for the solar thermal, which would anyways from 2 to 8 years for the solar thermal, and then 2 years for the geothermal. So the geothermal options requires a source of geothermal energy near the oil field, and any in-house equipment and the expertise will definitely help in lowering down the cost of this option. So choices really depends on the practicality in the Lost Hills oil field. And with that, we are ready for your questions.
Yeah, thank you. Right on time. Judges, you may begin asking questions.
So great presentation. Thank you. I'm Barbara Berger. How did you come up with 2 years for geothermal? I like the fact that you identified, the scope 1 is really the opportunity area, that you had some particular alternatives, but I guess the geothermal, I was curious about the time. And maybe just a second question is the solar thermal. What do you know about what Chevron has done, if anything, in the solar thermal area in this particular part of California?
So Abhijit, do you want to answer the first question?
Yeah. So with the first questions for the 2 years of the geothermal, we did study some of the reports, the previous reports from the California governments, and where we saw the time scale, which is close to like 2 years, considerable time scale for the 2 years for the geothermal, with the consideration of the expertise of the Chevron in drilling and operations in the oil field, which is typically like the complementary skill sets which comes with the already work that Chevron is doing.
Regarding solar thermal, Chevron have tried a tower and field reflector array arrangement back in 2010 or 2011, but the horizontal trough reflector design appears to be more economically viable, and has been one such development has been completed in Oman from 2015 to the present day, and each phase has been completed on time and in budget.
Also, if I may point out, the suggestion to use geothermal for direct heating of water to turn it into steam makes it more efficient and potentially quicker to build than if the geothermal plant was meant to generate electricity.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much. Again, great research and presentation. As Barbara stated, multiple similar projects has been in there, and I'll ask you to check with Oman to see what the project is going. It's a Glass Point project. In your analysis for both of the options that you propose, what are the key technology developments that you think that may happen that will increase the probability of economic success of both of these projects? For geothermal, what will have the most impact to make it better? And same with the solar to steam.
One recent development with geothermal is the use of carbon dioxide as the heat carrying medium instead of water, and reportedly that carbon dioxide flows quicker through the hot rock substrate than water does, and that could result in higher output.
Thank you.
And to clarify, that is supercritical carbon dioxide.
Yeah, the closed loop system. No, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and an oil field would have a plentiful supply of carbon dioxide. Any other questions?
Since we have time, I'll ask for the solar to steam. And we are very familiar with the Oman project as well, like I mentioned. What do you think that will improve their performance as well?
Say it again, sorry.
For okay, sorry, ran out of time. That's good. All right.
That's
well,
right.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys can stop the screen share and leave the meeting, and best of luck.